Hi, y'all. It's Brigitte Cutshall with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Dana Sutton. She is a tutor, a coach, and the author of children's books. Can you say hi, Dana?
Everybody, happy to be here.
I'm glad we connected. I love speaking with people who have explored the path of books, especially children's books. Dana and I were talking before hit recording how we both think it's so important, especially for kids, to learn how to read and to think. And some people want to go to audiobooks, right? So Dana, what I guess prompted you to go down the path to even create your first children's book?
Well, as you said, you said in the introduction, I've been a tutor and a coach for many, many years. And I've tutored everything from preschool right up to first and second year university. And in all of that, a lot of tutoring is also sort of secondhand parenting and helping teenagers navigate different relationships in their lives and that kind of thing. And so I'd often been suggested to me that I should write a parenting book. However, I actually own a full-time business and with employees and work and everything else. And I just writing a full-length novel or a full-length parenting book is really time consuming. It's not a straightforward process. And I just thought I don't have time for that right now. But I started thinking about it and thinking, you can do similar things, pick one lesson at a time and give those lessons in children's books aspect both the children and the parents receive the message. And so the first book I ended up writing, I was thinking about it and thought, what was the most important lesson that my parents taught me and that I hope that I passed on to my children and grandchildren? And that lesson was, you can do hard things. Nobody gets through life scot-free. Nobody skates through without challenges and difficult times, difficult moments, difficult situations to navigate. But when you have the confidence that you're capable of managing hard things, it makes life a lot easier. So that was actually the title of the first book we wrote, You Can Do Hard Things. And most of the scenes in that particular book are actual scenes from my children's lives over the years. And then we moved on to book 2, which was a bit of a different story. Yeah.
I like that. You can do hard things. I like that title. People need to realize life is hard no matter what you're going through. And I think we learned a lot from hard things that we have dealt with. And I think you're helping bring that point up. And I've learned from me to try to reflect and not react or pause on things that are coming up. You're going to less likely escalate something to make it worse. But again, it depends on the situation. And I think you're also helping instill communication skills with them, probably with your tutoring and the writing. That is so critical. I think people take that for granted. How to read and everything helps you pause and helps you think about the situation. And some people, one thing that annoys me, I'm sorry this out there, all these shortcuts to do everything. Like there isn't a shortcut. Sorry, in my opinion, there's not. It's based on our age, right, Dana? We know.
Yes, I agree.
There's not you want to make sure you're doing the right, things. So that you have to practice. You have to, I shouldn't use the word experiment, but it's okay to try different things. And that's when you can learn more about yourself.
Yeah, one of the set things that I've always said to my kids, both in tutoring my own children and in coaching, is you don't learn from wins. You learn from losses. And that means you have to be open to trying, knowing that you might not succeed at whatever it is that you're doing. But it's okay. It's hard. Sometimes you have to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And I think really as parents, we lost a little bit of that philosophy where, we had a period, I think, where parents really tried to solve problems for our children rather than providing guidelines within which they could solve their own problems. And I think that's a really, really important lesson for kids is that, because if we as parents are solving problems for our children, the implication is that we don't believe in them. And I really think that the most important thing they have to know is that we do believe in them, that they're capable.
They are capable. And we are setting an example, like you said. We don't want to solve everything. You need to guide them. And as you were mentioned earlier about the sports, I had talked to someone, a guy who was a coach. I think he was a football coach, or maybe soccer. He's from the UK, so it probably means soccer. But he taught one of his kids a lesson. His team had lost, and he came in, he had an L, he put an L on his forehead, and he asked the kids what that L meant. And they had lost the game, and so they thought they had lost. He says, no, this means, what did you learn today? And that's what kind of ties in with what you said. They need to reflect upon that. I learned more from losing stuff, not losing stuff, but what could I do better next time? Or it just depends on the goal. If you're working on a project or something that a passion that you're trying to follow. So I get the other thought, you mentioned tutoring. What type of tutoring did you do? What was it, a class?
So I taught everything. I tutored everything except second languages. So English, mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, social studies, pretty much any of the subjects from preschool all the way up through to first and second year university.
That's awesome. It shows to me, Dana, that you're very curious. And I like that. Curiosity helps us move forward. It helps us also learn about different things and learn from mistakes. And you're not doubting yourself. You're just trying to move forward. And I think we need to do it. I like that. I've never tutored, but my sister is a teacher, but I think I've helped coaching more on the how to nutrition properly with like athletics, because I'm involved in that aspect as well. And because I loved it when I was young, as I should say, as a kid. But you have a son, right? And I had two. You want to make sure they get their energy out as well. And that's why I think sports is important for that, especially young men, young boys.
Yeah. My son and at one point he was at the World Championships, and he had qualified in many fighting categories, but also in his forms category. And for the entire 6 months leading up to it, we had been suggesting perhaps you need to practice your forms. Not interested, was more interested in the sparring. And we got there. And of course, he got there a week ahead of time with his Team Canada coaches. And he got out there the first day of practice and couldn't remember his bow form. And he kind of came off. He was pretty embarrassed, and he was pretty mortified, and he came over. Unfortunately for him, I was one of the junior instructors for his particular school. So we got out and we went through his form and got him going, and he practiced it all week. So when the World Championships came, when the competition came, he came in 5th.
Wow.
And he was quite upset, and he came off, and he was young. He was very young at the time, and he had a bit of tears in his eyes, and we stepped aside, and I said, you don't get to be sad about this one. You look at the boys that won, and darn well those boys had been practicing their forms for months and months and months. If you had been practicing that much and you were upset, that's okay. That's acceptable. But I said, you didn't even know your form on Monday. So this isn't one you get to be accepted one. This is one where you have to acknowledge, I made a mistake. I didn't do what I needed to do, and life goes on. You'll try again next time.
I like that analogy. It applies to everything, not just sports, but reading. Look, you got to practice reading. You have to practice writing. You have to practice cooking. You have to practice gardening. I always talk about, I'm a gardener, but gosh, it's amazing some of the plants that survive me, Dana, because it depends on the weather. It's been, that's what it is. You have to, if you really are passionate about it, you will find the time to practice. And that's, again, I know some like you mentioned, athletes that are really good. That's because they're putting the time to practice. And same with, like I said, anything in life, you have to show up and you have to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And so what do you think, as we were talking, all this technology that we got, that the kids are on, I'm talking about the apps. That's why I think physical books are so important. So how do you think that's going to affect their thinking and learning skills?
It's an interesting conversation, because there are aspects of it that I think are very beneficial. There are definitely pieces that are very beneficial to kids, particularly if they have learning disabilities or that kind of thing. There's definitely positives, but you also in the same breath have this idea that it's not positive if you're on it 24 hours a day. That was something as a parent that we struggled with a little bit. My children particularly were sort of the first generation that had all those apps in their hands all the time and looked at them, and we struggled a little bit. And what we decided to do was we didn't put limits on their screen time, but we put minimums on their activity time. So they had to have a minimum number of physical activity things each week. They had to have a minimum amount of time spent outside and doing things. And so in that way, we felt that, okay, if they meet all of these minimums, then the screen time is much like watching TV would have been for me.
That's true.
And that's how we managed it with our kids was we really focused on you had to have outside things as well. And I think if you do that and you have balance, then you can enjoy the benefits without the detractors. But I think the problem comes when that is the only form of interaction with the world. I used to say to my kids, the world doesn't exist inside your phone.
That's true. I think that is what I've seen. Some people are just letting their kid is distracting them, the parent, and they give their kid an iPad. You know what I'm saying? That's what I've
Yeah.
seen. I don't think they should do. I think it would be better to let them go play in the backyard if you have a backyard. That's what I think that would be a little bit better. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not a perfect parent, right? And I
None of us is.
right when nobody is, and so we were like you and I, we were learning like what is this stuff? We had
Yeah.
to learn too because we didn't know the parents the impact that could have long term. We didn't know that. At
Hmm.
least we both focused on that's one thing we have in common. You need to go do some movement, do some sport to get that energy out, and then they wouldn't be too um, much into their apps. But I did want when they first came out, their phones had to be like downstairs with me at bedtime. I didn't want them to have it 24/7 just because I just had my instinct as a mom. It's not
Yeah.
who knows what they're going to find out there. And that's you just to me we got to use it ethically.
Mhm.
The good point of the tech is like Zoom. We're having a Zoom call, guys. She's in Canada and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia area. We never would have had this 10 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we're all learning when I like to look at something I've taught my sons is to look at the positive aspect of something after something bad happens. You have to acknowledge it. I like to focus on the something good. That's just me.
Mhm.
You probably understand that's important as well. Look, we have to acknowledge it, but then what good is coming out of this down the road?
Yeah, my daughter one time, my biological children are biracial, and their father is of Asian descent. And when my daughter, when she was sort of 17 or 18, said, "You guys didn't give us any culture," because he elected not to pass on his second language. His frame of reference was it's a dialect that they would only speak in one small village in China. It's not going to be helpful to them, and so we won't focus on that. And but I said to my daughter, I said, no, we did, but what we have is a very pragmatic culture. I said, "Oh, if you look at sort of all the generations of our family, it's very much movement oriented and next step. So when something really good happens, let's celebrate it. That's fantastic. Good job. What do we do next?" And the same thing when something bad happens. That's terrible. Let's be sad for a few moments. Let's look at what happened and could we made any changes and would we do anything different next time? And now what's next? And it's a very pragmatic view of the world is that okay, that's done, but we're still moving forward and let's not get focused too much on either the good or the bad. Let's
Right.
just acknowledge these are experiences and we've had them and how are they going to contribute to our next step forward. And when she thought about it that way, and she thought, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess that is very much how our family, like I said, multiple generations of it functions. So
Yeah, I like the word pragmatic. And it also made me think of the words don't get stuck in the weeds. I don't know
yeah,
where I've heard that, but it's been around a while. I'm
yeah,
kind of the similar in a way. My mother is half French and half Vietnamese, and she married an American soldier who was in the Vietnam
yeah.
and all that stuff. So I grew up in that kind of pragmatic. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but
Hmm.
I think it helps when you have that. It helps you be more, I shouldn't use the word empathetic, but you understand people better. You're less likely to judge them
Yes.
because it's just so helpful. I like that. People talk about being in a tribe is good or you want to be around like-minded people, but you also need to be open to a different perspective. That's what I think. That's probably one of the reasons why I don't like politics. Sorry, I never ever talk about it, because it's so divided. It's,
Yes.
it's on purpose though. And
Hmm.
that's why I'm like, go away. I don't think about it. But then I just still try to listen. Um, I was bullied, by the way, when I was young. I grew up in the South because my mother she didn't speak proper English. You know what I'm saying? It's like I can't help it. That's my mother. But she was a good role model.
Hmm.
I think that's what we want to do for our kids. And she kept being her, and I've learned to be me, and like you, Dana, or being you. And I think you're helping. I just love this idea. You're helping so many people. And I didn't know you had such a strong background in tutoring. I think that is so, so critical. That is something that we need more of. And I think with education opportunities changing so much, right? You're kind of in a way
Hmm.
guiding them, right? What they should focus on. They can find that. It kind of blends in with coaching, right?
It really does. And, one of the things that I often say to people about tutoring is, 90% of tutoring is helping them to manage their emotions and their anxiety and their fears and their relationships with other kids and with their parents, and helping them, to realize that life life is going on. Life is going to go on regardless of what's happening right now. There's more out there. There's more opportunity. I always jokingly said to my kids when they were in the midst of their difficult times in high school was the people that tell you that high school was the best time of their lives didn't do anything after. And that's it, right? I said, when you look back, by the time you hit 25, you're going to look back and high school was the blink of an eye. And I know it feels terrible right now, and you're in the middle of all of these hormones and relationship struggles and things like that. But when you look back, it'll be the blink of an eye, and there will be other things in your life, and it's okay. You're going to make it through. And that's, and also helping them to understand that there's no single path forward in life. If you want to be a nurse, you can do a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, or you can do a registered nursing assistant, we call them, or a licensed practical nurse, or a care aide first. Like, there's so many. Just because this door isn't open to you doesn't mean you can't achieve that. It just means you need to take a different route. And there are all kinds of routes to the same endpoints that can be accessed. So you don't need to worry if you don't have a 98% average with 4 sports and 3 community service things on your applications. It's okay. There will be other opportunities for you.
And I'm a believer of listening to some people think it's cheesy, but I think you should listen to your instincts sometimes. And they were, for me, trying to, you're so good at this, that, and running. Like, you need to, I'm like, I didn't want that pressure, Dana, right? College. Then I'm like, I needed to focus on my education and not, to me, I still run, but I run for fun. I don't do it to go
Mhm.
win a race, right? That's what I felt some of the higher levels that you get in sports. That's the downside of it.
Yeah.
I think I've met some students or athletes, whatever I should say, who felt stressed out from that. And it just depends on, there's just so many aspects of it. But I think I love to run. I still do it. I don't do marathons because my body says don't do that because it'll hurt your body.
Yeah.
And that is, I like to hang around people who like to move, not necessarily marathoners, but it's just something I find joy in it, and I try to help other people find joy in something. And
Yeah.
the other thing, I guess I'm kind of jumping back to your book, is my understanding is some people find some of the topics that you have are not appropriate. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things, we've had really varied response to both books. So the first book is You Can Do Hard Things, and the second book is Maddie Finds Her Place, and that's based on my my adopted daughter's life. She didn't come to me until she was almost 17, and she came out of a youth homeless shelter and came in under more of a landlord situation, and eventually we ended up adopting her. But of course, her background was very, very, very different than my children's background. And, so there's lots of different sort of pieces of things that we write about in our books. But one scene that in particular really upset some people, some reviewers, was in the first book. There's a situation where the daughter's talking to her mom about her boyfriend, and she says, he's not nice to me when people aren't around. Like, he's nice when everybody else is there, but he's not nice when people aren't around. And we had a few reviewers that said, well, that's not appropriate for a children's book. And it's not, that's talking about abusive relationships and everything else. And so I always kind of take the time to explain, well, if you're reading that.
You died.
Okay, so in that particular scene, the girl is talking about her boyfriend, and a lot of reviewers are having very, very strong reactions, saying that's not an appropriate topic for a children's book and that kind of thing. But one of the things that I've said is, you're reading this as an adult with adult experiences and adult knowledge, and you're looking at that and saying, oh, that's a red flag for something that's going to be a very controlling or developed, adult relationship. But I said, a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, when you're reading that with them, it can be just as easily about our friends and our friends treating us well when it's just us, or do they treat us differently when it's just us versus when we're with other people? But a child doesn't have that same visceral reaction to that because they don't have that same life experience. And so when I look at it as this is an opportunity to talk to your kids when they're young, within a frame of reference relative to them and what a good friend is and what a good friend isn't. And that knowledge, when you start young, helps to protect them when they are teenagers and they get to those points and maybe they do see those red flags. And those red flags go back and forth. It's not just girls that watching, their boyfriends. It's boyfriends with their relationships in general aren't about controlling each other and shouldn't have differences between when everybody else is there and when they're not. So I often have to remind adults, you're reading that from an adult perspective with adult experiences, but you're reading to a child who doesn't have that. And honestly, if a child at that age does have that visceral response, that's even more reason to be talking to them about it, because so I really don't think there are topics that are off limits. I think it's about how you approach them and what you do with that conversation with them.
Right. And I see it too, is that in the book, the child has trust sharing that with the parent, because that's what you want. You don't want them to hide stuff, because then that's when, the parent might have a good response and they might not, but I think you want your child to be able to be honest, to be able to not be afraid to share things with you. That's kind of how Bridget's take is. I didn't share everything with my parents, but I just think it's important to do that. And I think we need to be, just open to that. And we just need to, everybody's background's different. Their situations are different. Their family sizes are different. Right. And I think that is something, and just be thankful they have a friend, right? That is something, a community is so important to build around that.
Yes. Yeah. And that experience also translated when when Maddie moved in with me initially, was you really had to just sit and listen, because her experience was so different than the experience my children had grown up with. And jumping in with an answer or what you thought was a solution or all of those things, it wasn't the right response. You needed to sit back and give her time to get all of the information out, and it came out in bits and pieces, right? It was never, here's the whole story. It was a little bit at a time. And that was hard sometimes because her experiences were tragic in some situations. And so the ability to just listen and be open, I think, provided her that little bit of trust she needed in order to start to open up more. And I think that's really important with your teenagers, especially, is not overreacting and not jumping in with solutions, and not, but just being the ear while they talk things through.
You created a safe space for her, sounds like to me. That's really what it is. And that's why you don't want to judge her, and do a little bit at a time and not have a giant mass of information coming out to you either, because you have to process it too, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That is so very, very helpful. I like what you're doing to help children, because that is something that we need to make sure with our constant change with tech. I just want to make sure we're guiding them properly. And then
Mhm.
we're learning from them too. They're telling us, I'm learning a lot from my sons on how to do things as well. But again, your curiosity is so helpful. I think that also opens up to being creative. You're writing a book. I just one more thought too. Who did the illustrations for your book?
So an artist called Nicholas Donovan Mueller has done the illustrations, and we have two more books that he's illustrating right now that he's working on for us. So he did a bang up job. We were really impressed with his art.
I love that. And that's right. You're giving him a perfect avenue to share his skill set. And you have a skill set of communicating with younger people. I mean,
Mhm.
children, high schoolers, and up to, like you said, college age, but that is so beautiful. So, one last question. What is one takeaway for the audience, based on your experience on how to deal with a child dealing with, uh, for them to be open with you, or they're as a parent?
I think honestly, as I said before, the biggest skill is not withholding an immediate reaction, is waiting till you have all of the information, and giving them time to work through it to get it out. I mean, we all remember being teenagers and how scary it could be sometimes to try to share information with adults when we were struggling with the situation. It's really about not overreacting. I mean, there are honestly times, not just with Maddie, times with all of the children at various times where you really wanted to go like, what are you talking about? Like, how did that happen? And instead you have to kind of take a deep breath and go, okay. And the one message I wanted all of my children and now my grandchildren to have is, I will always help you solve the problem first. I might yell at you later if there was really poor decision making involved, but always, always, I will help you solve the problem first. And I think if that's the message your children have, then when they need you, they will come to you.
They won't.
Yeah.
And families it's so important to stay connected no matter what. I think it's
Mhm.
great. So, Dana, where can people learn more about you?
So I have a website, www.danasuttonbooks.com. It's very easy to find. And our books are available on all the main bookstores. So Indigo, Barnes and Noble. It's available, I think, on walmart.com and through Amazon. So the books can be bought in any of the major online bookstores and also from the website as well. We also have some activity sheets for kids, coloring sheets, that kind of thing, and just more information about me and my background and what the upcoming books will be.
That's awesome. I do appreciate what you're doing and helping the future generations. And for those that are listening, I'll include the link that she mentioned in the description. And thanks again for your time.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day, guys.